Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. Today, I want to ask you about your constitution, the agreement you've made with yourself to learn English. That document which gives you self-governance to practice English, what does it look like? Does it say that for 1 hour a day, for example, you're going to practice? Does it include things like shadowing, trying to speak better, meeting your language exchange partner? I want you to think for a moment just what self-governance means. It seems that across the world today, in Africa, Europe, the Middle East, there are leaders around who are kind of past their term time. They don't know when to quit. They just seem to keep going until eventually something happens which forces them to be removed. And that looks a lot like violence, bloodshed, and revolt against things which we have been taught are dear in our societies. In order to examine this topic more, we must make a difference between the word government, which is political parties, administration, people, and the word governance, which is all about how you are governed by a particular authority. Because coming back to English learning, whoever's governing you is going to have a really big say in your learning experience. We can see that in some parts of the world, how people are governed by their government has caused a lot of pain, revolt, violence, and problems. So if we look at self-governance and how we govern ourselves with English, do we find peace there? Do we find an agreement, a governance that meets all of our needs? And that is a really big question. And at the heart of it, the question is, well, who's our governor? Who or what government is it that's governing your learning? If we can define what a good government looks like with regard to learning, then we should be able to see what good governance looks like. And it seems that we don't really have so many examples of that in the world today. Even the democratic world is beginning to kind of shake a little bit. So let's look at some adjectives of healthy governments to see how we can apply them to your English learning. One thing is flexibility. A good government has to be flexible. It has to be ready to change at every moment to support the needs of the people. Does your language learning look like that? Are you flexible? For example, if your husband works in the evenings one day and in the daytime the next day, are you able to change your language learning hours, or are they fixed? You know, I have a really noisy neighbor who causes me a lot of grief. I used to try studying every day at the same time, despite hearing the person moving around above me. But then it got to a point that either I would have to confront the person about their behavior or quite simply change my routine. I changed my routine and now I'm much happier. Okay, I'm not able to study in the time that I wanted, but I'm studying much better and easier in a new time slot that I've created. So, flexibility is very, very important in any governmental system. The other thing we have to think about is persistence. This is a good word for a government because a government shouldn't be giving up. There shouldn't be a problem coming up and then the government says, you know what, we can't deal with that, so we're just going to put it on hold right now. And likewise, the government can't look at a problem and say, well, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, so I'm just going to leave it. What does that look like in your English learning program? Do you sometimes stop, for example? Or when you see a problem, the present perfect, the past tense, do you just ignore it and hope it'll go away? Of course not. You should really get into it. Not by staring at a grammar book for a few hours, but really by getting into a conversation, just by trying to use the things that you've learned. What about stability? Stability is very, very important because it gives you a platform from which to create your government. And if you get this platform right, governance, which comes down to the people, is going to feel good because it feels like it's coming from a source which is stable, which is ready, which can cope with problems, which can cope with difficulties. What does that look like within your English learning? Do you feel that you have stability? Or are you kind of looking over your shoulder, wondering when the next calamity is going to happen? Many of us don't feel stable because our learning process isn't coming from a whole place. It's coming from a place of fear, maybe because we live in a country where war is imminent, or maybe because we know we need to have English for our jobs or for our future. So, what does stability look like in your English practice? So, we've spoken about flexibility, persistence, stability. The next one almost certainly has to be trust. Do you trust yourself with English? Do you trust other people enough to tell them that you're learning English so that they can support you? Have you trusted someone else to help you on your journey, like a language exchange partner? Each of these words has an infinite capability. These words are very positive, profound words which have kept governments going. So, let's talk about your government and what that looks like. Remember, governments are people and administrations, but your self-governance, what does that look like? Is it solid? Is it a solid platform from which you can learn? I'm not asking you to run away and sit on top of a mountain for 3 days to think about this. But what I am asking is to ensure that your thoughts are in the right place. Learning English involves a lot of purity, hiding it from people, not being honest with people, doing it just so that you can escape from another country really doesn't solve the problem. If it's true that our thoughts make our world, then learning English should be coming from an abundance of positivity rather than a feeling of great weakness. from a place of I am happy rather than English can make me happy. A place which says, how can I be happier with English rather than saying, I'm sad, I want English to make my life complete. Finally, I just want to remind you that English is a language. That means that it needs to be shared. It needs the whole world to share with you in your learning process. It's not something that you can do alone. And I know many of you today are sitting there with a book, terrified to talk to people. What would that look like in a government? I think an enclosed government like that wouldn't be very successful. In fact, we know that that model isn't successful. So reaching out beyond your limits may be part of your self-governance. So, again, I want you just to examine today what governs your learning and what habits has it given you. That's it from me. Plenty of things there to think about. See you. Bye.